If it wasn't for a broken organ in an Austrian church, we never would have heard what would become the most recorded Christmas hit ever. This is the story of Silent Night.
Behind the Christmas hits with Drew Savage.
I'll be honest, it feels strange to me to call Silent Night a hit. I have such strong memories of hearing it in church as a kid, and back then I thought of church songs and hit songs being two different things. But Silent Night is most definitely a hit by any definition of the word. The story begins over 200 years ago in 1818 at St. Nicholas Church, how fitting is that, in Oberndorf, Austria, which is about 17 kilometers north of Salzburg. Joseph Moore was the 25-year-old assistant priest and was given one of his first big responsibilities that Christmas: organize the music for Christmas Eve Mass. It had been a brutal winter thus far. There had literally been 10 feet of snow on the ground, and it was tough to keep houses and buildings warm. On the morning of December 24th, the clouds broke and the sun came out. Moore made his way to church to get a fire going. He also lit candles and said a prayer before the evening began, hoping for a good turnout and God's blessing for the service. As he was finishing his prep of the church, he sat down at the organ to play a few notes, and it was dead. He tried to get it going for over a half hour, but he couldn't get it to make a single sound. Moore was devastated over what this might mean for Christmas Eve Mass, so he did what you and I do when we're in a jam. He turned to a friend, Franz Gruber, a 31-year-old primary school teacher who was also the church's choir master and organist. Gruber lived in Arnsdorf, the next town over, and Moore got there as quickly as he could. Moore was hoping Gruber might have some idea how to fix the organ, but he did not. However, he offered to play his guitar for the service instead. Now, a new problem presented itself. The carols Moore had selected were chosen because of how they'd sound on a big, majestic church organ. A single acoustic guitar probably wouldn't work, so they plowed through some music books looking for ideas when inspiration struck. Moore recalled writing a Christmas poem years earlier after a walk in the snow. Moore thought if he could find that old poem, Gruber could perhaps write a melody for it. Moore returned home and ransacked his room. In his bottom desk drawer, he found that poem, still knocked. Moore went back to Gruber's house, and Franz was able to put the poem to music. Remember, all this back and forthing between towns in the early 1800s is happening on the same day, Christmas Eve. What seemed like such a long shot to salvage the evening Mass was now a reality, and the congregation loved it. But it took more than this one lone, snowy Christmas Eve service to turn the song into a hit. A few weeks later, a repairman came to fix the organ, Karl Moriker. Moore told the repairman the story of the Christmas Eve service and how he and his friend cobbled together this song for the service. Moriker asked to hear it, so Moore sang it a cappella. Moriker liked it so much, he wrote the words down and began to share them with other churches he serviced across the country. Within a decade, hundreds of church choirs in Austria and Germany had added the song to their Christmas services. But the carol's big break would come in 1832, when King William IV of Prussia heard it performed at a concert in Leipzig. He was so taken with it, he asked the Prussian Cathedral Choir to sing it at their annual Christmas celebrations. In 1839, the Reiners, an Austrian family of singers, traveled to New York and performed the song for the first time in North America. By 1850, it was the most popular Christmas carol in the U.S. In 1859, an Episcopalian priest named John Freeman wrote and published the English translation that we sing today. According to the Ace Collins book, Stories Behind the Greatest Hits of Christmas, the power of the song was so great that on Christmas days during the U.S. Civil War, hostilities between the Union and Confederacy would cease, and troops on both sides could be heard singing Silent Night. In 1905, Silent Night took another huge step forward when it was recorded for the very first time. The Haydn Quartet was a hugely successful barbershop-style group who decided to make a Christmas album. Instead of singing Silent Night, Holy Night, they sang Silent Night, Hallowed Night, which is how the song was sung for more than a generation. Over the next 30 years, different recordings of the song hit the pop charts 5 times. None of them are probably versions you're familiar with. The oldest popular version was recorded in 1935 by Bing Crosby. No one singer has ever had more success recording Christmas music than Bing Crosby. But in 1935, he hadn't recorded any. This was before White Christmas, I'll Be Home for Christmas, and all of his other holiday hits. Bing was working with the Catholic charity, the St. Columban Foreign Missionary Fathers. Father Richard Rannigan had just returned from a mission to China where they shot a documentary that hoped to inspire Americans to donate money and help hungry children in China. It was Bing's brother Larry who suggested he sing a couple of Christmas songs for the film's soundtrack. It was decided Bing would sing Adeste Fideles and Silent Night. There were no plans to release his version of either song until Bing's brother Bob suggested he do it and donate all the proceeds to the same charity. Bing had never recorded a Christmas song before, but after his version of Silent Night peaked at number 7, it would be something he'd do for the rest of his career. That original version is widely available on digital platforms. Just search for Bing Crosby Silent Night 1935 single version. For Silent Night's 100th birthday in 1918, the residents of Oberndorf wanted to do something special. St. Nicholas Church, where the song was first performed, had been torn down in 1913 after suffering damage in multiple floods over the years, so it was decided that a monument would be built in its place. Construction began in 1924, but due to political and economic conditions at the time, it wasn't completed until 1937. And on August 15th of that year, the Silent Night Chapel was open to the public. Thousands come every year to visit the chapel and the adjacent museum. Mass is still held on Christmas Eve every year at 5 p.m., and Silent Night is sung several times in different languages. If you're interested in watching the services, it's now streamed every year online. If you happen to visit the Silent Night Chapel, there is an unusual item embedded in one of the walls. Some have even called it ghoulish. Joseph Muhlbacher was a sculptor who would create statues of the two songwriters, Moore and Gruber. Gruber had sat for many portraits over the years, but Moore never did. By the early 1900s, no one even knew what he looked like. So Muhlbacher went searching for Moore's grave and found it in Wagram, Austria, the site of his last posting as a priest. This does get strange, but remember the time. Muhlbacher dug up the grave and used Moore's skull and remains to inform his sculpture. The skull remained in storage for years, but when the Silent Night Chapel finally opened, Moore's skull was embedded in the wall, where it remains today. Muhlbacher's statue of the two men is on display just outside. One final storyline to talk about here, and it involves one of my favorite Christmas movies, Die Hard. Yes, it is a Christmas movie. If the name Franz Gruber sounds familiar, it might be because of Alan Rickman's character, Hans Gruber, the bad guy who took over the Nakatomi Plaza. Is there a connection here? There wasn't in the beginning. Die Hard was based on a book called Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. In the book, the bad guy's name is Anton Gruber, not Hans Gruber. In 2017, a writer named Mark Seaford asked screenwriter Stephen E. D'Souza on Twitter about this theory Die Hard fans had speculated about. Was the name Anton changed to Hans as a subtle tip of the cap to the co-writer of Silent Night? D'Souza responded and said, quote, "That's a better story than the truth, which is that the typical pre-production database search discovered a real person named Anton who could claim to be maligned. So the studio lawyers advised that it be changed." Lawyers, always getting in the way of a good story. Joseph Moore died in 1848. Franz Gruber passed in 1863. Because of the time, neither one really enjoyed any financial success from the song. Both died without much money at all. But what a legacy. Their names deserve to be known. And so does the story that gave us the song that would be recorded over 137,000 times, more than any Christmas song ever. I'm Drew Savage. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at Drew Savage on Air. I would love to interact with you there. And if you've enjoyed this story, please leave us a review and hit subscribe. It helps other people find the podcast and ensures that you never miss a story behind the Christmas hits.